and welcome into You Pod to Win the Game. I am Jori Epstein for Yahoo Sports here with Charles McDonald, one Charles today, but a great Charles at that. C-Mac, how are you?
I'm doing good. We're a few days away from a holiday weekend. I'm trying not to check out, but you have my full engagement at least for the next hour. I can give you that. But we're right here on the edge of about to hit the 4th of July weekend, going on vacation, going to Baltimore this weekend too. So got some good things lined up, and I'm excited to give people this podcast. So hopefully they have something to listen to for their drives or whatever they got going on this weekend. But you got my brain for like an hour and a half. I'll give you that.
I was going to say, the fact that we have to say aloud that we've got your engagement in your brain definitely makes me question whether that's the case. It also makes me just want to be on alert the whole show now. Like at the end, what percentage of C-Mac's brain do we feel like was engaged here? So I'm not saying I'm not in the same place, but the whole saying it out loud, now we're going to be a little skeptical. So we will be the judge of that, but I'm excited. We've got a little bit of news to touch on, a couple articles we wrote, and then we've got something fun, which is we ranked NFL teams by tiers, and we're going to see where we were similar, where we were different, and kind of break it down. Great off-season topic. So starting off with news, it's June 29th as we're recording this, and CBS is hiring J.J. Watt to be an analyst, which both you and I agreed we're excited about. We think he'll be great. The NFLPA on Wednesday announced its first new executive director in 14 years, Lloyd Howell, not to be confused with Sam Howell, the quarterback who will be across the city in Washington, D.C. He comes from a business background, not a sports background. I'm curious, one, what you make of this hire. Does it matter? Should fans care? And then two, I was on a conference call yesterday with Howell and with NFLPA president JC Tretter, and they basically talked about how they had this 16-month-long search, and they didn't tell anyone who the candidates were along the way. They went through this thorough process, and they're like, we don't want media pressure on who's going to be the next executive director. So guys showed up to vote this week. 30 of 32 teams were represented, although not all of the people from the teams who were eligible to vote came. And no one knew before this week who the candidates were that they were voting on. And then they showed up, they heard, they voted, and now you've got Lloyd Howell as executive director. Like, what's going on here?
That seems a little bit sketchy to me. I know this is a more extreme example, but imagine like getting down to the ballot box for the presidential election and you're like, oh, well, yeah. I don't know who's been running, but here we are. Here are my choices. I would hope that, in the time that they, from the time that they figure out who the candidates were to the time that they cast their votes, they did some research and learned about the guys and tried to figure out their background and see how it would fit with their mission, as a union. But I kind of look at this hire the same way I look at, a lot of like general manager hires, which I don't really know. We'll see what happens when you kind of get into the booth. I don't have a take on Lloyd Howell and how, qualified he is for this job, but I do think that this is absolutely something that fans should care about. This is the health of your sport. The union is kind of what keeps it from owners just running roughshod all over the players and, potentially getting diminished product at the end of the day. So, we'll see what Lloyd gets done. I don't really know what to expect of him just because, I don't really know too much about his background and what his relationship is like with the owners. It seems like DeMaurice Smith had a pretty close relationship with the owners. Not really sure if Lloyd is in the same boat, but here's a hoping that he does a good job because I think it's really important for the health of the sport.
Right. I think it's interesting too. And as we were on this call and kind of wondering about the transparency, I couldn't tell him, like, is this so inside football that no one's going to care? But to me, it's like, you don't have to be a democratic process if you don't want to. But don't tell us you're so concerned about being democratic when I don't think you are. I mean, J.C. Tretter got an amendment passed in the summer of 2022 to make this process confidential when it had not been in the past. He then didn't even tell people about the candidates. At most, maybe they got 1 or 2 days heads up before the vote. It doesn't seem like that. Like, they got there this week. They voted Wednesday morning. He won't even tell us how many candidates there were. He said we had to bring 2 to 4, and we met that constitutional rule. I asked him when they first started talking to Lloyd Howell. He said he didn't remember. He'd have to check his notes. Like, you cannot convince me that is an accurate statement. And then he kept going on and on about confidentiality. Well, we were doing this for good governance. And I was like, can you explain, JC, to me why confidentiality is good governance? Because some people would say transparency is good governance. And he just went into this whole like anti-media tirade and was like, and the players showed what we are capable of doing by going through this process with confidentiality. And there's just a part of me, and again, obviously we're biased in the sense that we are media, but like, I'm not saying you should have us voting. We shouldn't. You're the players union. But I do think that if your crowning achievement is that you didn't tell the media something, like maybe you should strive for loftier goals. Like maybe you should try and get someone who's best going to represent the players. And none of this is a knock on Lloyd Howell, because he might be great. And I think he comes from an impressive background. And I think he has a lot of chops. But I was pretty surprised by the tone of the call. It feels a little to me like the NFLPA executive board basically just knows that the overwhelming majority of players aren't going to get involved in this. They're not super concerned. The CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, is currently running through the 2030 season. So this is not imminently relevant to them. And like, how many players who are playing right now are even going to be playing in 2031? I think that's what's going on, but it'll be interesting to see. And it'll be interesting to see, is there another lockout that could come in the future? What does Lloyd Howell believe on that? How will he work with the players? This is not imminent, but it's stuff to kind of keep on the back burner. We've got that. The other big-ish, you were talking about how big this actually is, piece of news that came down this week was 4 more gambling suspensions from the NFL. So we have 3 players who bet on NFL games and were suspended for at least the entire 2023 season. They have the ability to apply for reinstatement after that, and that is the Colts, Isaiah Rodgers, and Rashad Berry, free agent Demetrius Taylor. And then for a partial suspension, the Tennessee Titans right tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere is suspended for the first 6 regular seasons of the game, and he put out a statement through Adam Schefter, among others, which basically said he didn't bet on NFL games. He didn't realize based off the rules that he couldn't bet at the facility, and he feels really bad that this happened. So how significant is this news? And does it change your mind at all about how we feel about the gambling policy? Do we think that more of this could be coming down? It seems like this is kind of the wave pre-summer news dump.
It's interesting in the fact that it has happened again, because
Right.
You would think that after the Calvin Ridley suspension, that guys will probably be a little bit more diligent about this, but they weren't. I can honestly believe that guys like, Jameson Williams or Nicholas Petit-Frere, when you have the 6-game suspension for gambling at the facility on stuff that's not football, I can honestly see how you get into that trap, like where that kind of messes you up. I don't know all the rules of every workplace that I've ever worked at. I know, the big ones, like, if I were to be an NFL player, by now it's abundantly clear that you cannot bet on NFL games. You already saw what the punishment for that was. And now, like, someone as good as Calvin Ridley is, this season is kind of like his NFL livelihood.
Right.
And I what I can't understand is, if you're Calvin Ridley and you get caught, he's good enough where he has a chance to like bounce back from this.
Yeah.
These other guys, I don't know. I don't really know what you're thinking here and how you can be that short-sighted, not to, to get on my high horse and lecture about this stuff. But I think another interesting point is Demetrius Taylor, the free agent who got suspended for a full year. He was on the Lions last year. So that's a lot of, gambling type, offenses coming back around to that specific organization. And you remember that they had, staffers involved in that in a March report. So it's a little frustrating that guys would keep putting themselves into a situation. But I also kind of think that I don't know how much more we're going to see of this, or maybe I'm naive, but I feel like, over the past month or so, we've seen teams like try to take a harder stance on like this gambling education, including like just flatly stating out like, basically, here's what Jameson Williams got wrong. You cannot bet on sports at the facility in any manner. So I wonder if this is just going to lead to more NFL players just not even touching gambling at all,
Right.
which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I do kind of think this might be one of the last like big waves of gambling infractions that we see, because it's more obvious than ever at this, exact point in time what you can do and what you cannot do as far as gambling concerned.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, which is when Calvin Ridley got suspended, it kind of felt like it came out of nowhere. What even are the rules? What did he break? Wasn't he believing in his team by betting on them? Like, not that he should do it, but it wasn't like he was using inside information that they were going to lose. Now, this is just such a public conversation in teams, in the league office, and in the media that you think that this ignorance case is just not going to be tolerated anymore. I think you also have to remember, and I tell this to people a lot when they talk about like a guy getting in trouble in the NFL for like off-field stuff. There's like 1,800 plus players in the NFL every year. So if you have 4 guys who break a rule, the overwhelming majority are not gambling, much less on other sports at the facility. So I don't think this is like, it feels like a rash also because it's, I guess, slower times, but I don't think that this is just this outbreak of issues. Now, for the Lions, when you start to pick out, hey, if they've got 5 guys out of 50 something who are doing it, that's a much bigger percentage, but I don't feel like this is a league-wide massive issue now. I do think it'll be interesting. Does the NFLPA try and take a stance on this? Do they try and come up with a clearer policy of like, if you're betting on another sport at the facility, first warning, or even is there some sort of thing like I could see the tech guys coming up with like, you know, when you were growing up, like, and you're at school and you're on the computer and all these websites are blocked. I don't know what you call it, if it's a firewall or what. Like, is there something like that they just put up at NFL facilities because teams don't want their guys suspended?
A firewall for FanDuel.
Yeah. Firewall for gambling at the facility. Like, these sites do not work on the premises. The funny thing with that will be then it's like you see the marketing department who's just trying to make sure they get the endorsement that their owner is getting from the gambling site and they can't get through. But I don't think this is massive. Obviously, it is massive for each of these individuals' lives. But when you look at how many players are in the NFL every year, this is actually not necessarily as monumental and changing in terms of who's going to be competitive as we thought it might be. So that is our news. Before we get to our super exciting tiers, you wrote an article this week on top 5 bounce back candidates in the NFL. So I want to kind of go through those, why you felt that way, starting with your favorite team, the Atlanta Falcons, and tight end Kyle Pitts. I was excited about this one. So take us through why Kyle Pitts is going to bounce back and what a bounce back could look like for him.
Okay, well, this is mainly just a personal gripe that I have. Well, I know he's still good. I feel very confident he's still good. But a lot of this is just like a personal gripe that I have with fantasy football Twitter, which is like they're so down on Kyle Pitts, which kind of blows my mind because, you know, he's only played 2 years. And the first year he played, he had 1,000 yards, like the first rookie tight end since like Mike Ditka to have 1,000 yards. So
is that good?
I think that's pretty good. Well, it's 17 game season now, so maybe it's not as impressive that he needed one more game to get there. But still, you know, this is still a guy who was, you know, talented enough to get taken 4th overall as a tight end, which is not something that we really see. He had a great rookie season, and last year it was just a combination of like uncommonly bad quarterback play, like specifically directed at him. Because I know, you know, when you look at Pro Football Focus,
directed at him.
Yeah, well, no, it's weird because when you look at like Pro Football Focus and the uncatchable target rate, Marcus Mariota towards Kyle Pitts is like it was 56% of his passes were uncatchable, which led the league, which is pretty wild. You know, like that's something that you expect. Like if I went out there and was trying to throw passes, like probably over half of them would just hit the turf and not even be remotely near him. But
I'm just picturing like player, the Mean Girls, like Kyle Pitts. Were you personally victimized by unseasonably inaccurate quarterback play? Uncatchable
I'm just telling
passes?
Him, it's okay, man. You can say yes. It's true. But you know, he's Kyle. This is a safe space, Kyle. You can say what you need to say. But you know, he's still 6'6", 250, runs a 4.4, has, you know, all of the athleticism and you know, pass catcher abilities that you would need to have a breakout year. So they're gonna have to lean on him again. I think if they're gonna, you know, actualize the best version of this offense, but with Bijan Robinson and, you know, year 2 Drake London, he should have opportunities to kind of get out there and make some big plays. So this is kind of an easy one to me because I even if he wasn't my favorite team, just like the pedigree and the success he already had as like a 21-year-old rookie, I think this is gonna be a pretty big year for him.
Yeah, I agree. The guy's still super talented. he had an injury and bad quarterback play. And then I think the number one thing to me is just having a guy like Bijan, Drake London, like having other guys to take attention is going to be great for Kyle Pitts. You could be like, oh, are we taking away attention from these pass catchers? And I think it's not that you're taking away touches, it's that you're allowing them to be open because the defenses have to account for someone else. So that's number one. Number two, moving on to Matthew Stafford and Matthew Stafford's elbow. I have no idea what to expect from him. Like, his ceiling is super high. You know that he's still got Cooper Kupp in the room. And on the other side of the ball, Aaron Donald, which is why we'll talk about it later. We didn't agree on where to put him for the tiers. But elbows just confuse me. Like, okay, Brock Purdy is throwing again. I don't know what to make of the Niners. I don't know what to make of the Rams. So is Matthew Stafford going to bounce back?
When me and, our wonderful editor, Joey Galino, we were talking about this list. Like, part of the idea was
you're going to get a text about that when Joey listens to this.
The idea for it kind of was like guys who needed a summer vacation, after what happened last season, just to bounce back, clear your mind for a bit. And I think Matthew Stafford definitely fits that description, and really probably like the whole Rams organization. Sean McVay should still be on vacation, like as long as he possibly can, after almost quitting last year. But to Stafford, I thought, when you go back and watch the games last year at the start of the season, I thought he still looked, pretty talented. It was just more like the situation around him had clearly crumbled from the year before. So the offensive line wasn't as good. Cooper Kupp missed time, didn't really have any running game whatsoever. But like his specific play, I didn't think was that bad. And then, the elbow kind of gets worse, and the Rams, I feel like by the end of the season, they just kind of said, all right, we're just going to try again next year. But this year, like if he's healthy, I don't think this is going to be a team that really even makes the playoffs. But if he's healthy,
spoiler
I think, yeah, spoiler. I think he's in
Still
for.
Listen to the tears, guys.
I think he's in for a bounce back campaign, from the sense that we should get to like looking at him as, this is probably a fringe top 10 quarterback at this point in his career. Even if the stat numbers aren't overwhelming like the year when he led the Rams to the Super Bowl, I think that this version of Stafford can at least get the Rams like pass offense back to looking functional in a way that they weren't last year. So that's why he's on this list.
Yeah, I love how you use the word crumbling, because offensive lines are often compared to like a wall, and a wall crumbles, and it's like their wall literally crumbled. Like first 9 weeks, 9 different offensive line combinations, no one protecting the guy. So he'll have better protection. He'll have a little bit more. I don't know why you're not pulling a Les Snead and believing that Stetson Bennett is coming to supplant him tomorrow, but
I've seen Stetson Bennett play college football since 2017. I know what I'm getting there.
Yes. Okay, moving on to your third, Pittsburgh Steelers running back Najee Harris. I loved this one because I think that when you think about what the Steelers did this offseason with their offensive line, both in free agency and the draft, the guy should have much better blocking in front of him. He should have a quarterback in Kenny Pickett, who is in year 2. That's helpful for RPOs. Why do you think Najee will bounce back?
It's more just about, like I said, the situation around him.
Yeah.
Last year was rough for him, man. And look, I credit him for being able to stay healthy for as many games as he did, because there's so many plays that are just dead on arrival where he gets the ball and he's running into the line of scrimmage and there's nobody there to make a block for him. But they made some upgrades on the offensive line. I really think a big thing too is going to have having Kenny Pickett and George Pickens in year 2, as they kind of get accustomed to what playing at an NFL speed is like. So you get, you're just looking at a more advantageous situation. I don't think it's, it's not like playing for the 49ers or something, and the scheme itself can kind of get things open for you. He's going to have to fight for it, but I think this is the best situation he's had since he got to Pittsburgh. The offensive line should be the best situation that he's had, especially if Broderick Jones can kind of hit the ground running. Kenny Pickett in year 2, theoretically should force defense to respect the pass a little bit more, or at least respect Pickett as a playmaker, which is gonna open some doors for Najee Harris. I don't know if this is gonna be the ideal situation for him to salvage what's going on, because last year it was pretty rough for him. I think he averaged less than 4 yards per carry, but it's good enough where he should be able to, get back to look like a first round running back if he's not like, I don't want to say punch drunk, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes. This fourth candidate is where I think our argument starts to fall apart, because we keep talking about how a bounce back is this confluence of not just what the player can do, but also the pieces around him. And then you bring me Arizona Cardinals linebacker, not linebacker anymore, Isaiah Simmons. So you had a specific argument. I have questions about if anyone can bounce back in Arizona this year, but explain your argument.
He's finally getting put back at the position that he should have played when he got drafted. Like the Isaiah Simmons conundrum, it's almost like a draft projection conversation to me, because when you go back to watch his Clemson stuff, his best work came at safety, and specifically like your traditional kind of like strong safety who's going to be playing over slot receivers and playing against tight ends and kind of being an enforcer on the edge of your defense. But he's 6'4", 235, so he kind of got pegged as, all right, well, you're going to be an inside linebacker who hopefully can kind of change the game, like a Fred Warner type could do, because they're similar sizes. You would think that with Isaiah's athleticism, he could do similar things to Fred Warner, but he's just not that type of player. And I think that that's okay. You don't have to just let your imagination run too wild, is what I'm trying to say, and try to put guys in the position that they're not the best, that doesn't suit their skill set the best. Because, I remember when you watch Isaiah Simmons at Clemson and he's got these reps where he's playing inside linebacker, it's not where he was most comfortable. He's more comfortable playing in space and getting the blitz off the edge. And I think if you take someone who kind of struggles with physicality in the box in college, and then you say, hey, now you're going to go play middle linebacker in the NFL, and we play, we play the Rams, the Seahawks, and the 49ers 6 times a year, that might be a bit of a tough spot for him. So he like this started last season. He's kind of got moved out from linebacker to safety, and it looked a little bit better. But I think that he's finally getting to play the spot that was meant for him in the NFL. And to me, that makes him a pretty good candidate for a bounce back, because he's still got all the athleticism in the world to kind of make that work.
There you go. All right, we've got our argument. Last player, Chicago Bears receiver Chase Claypool, midseason trade from Pittsburgh last year. In 7 games, the man had 140 yards. That's 20 yards per game and 0 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He caught 48.3% of passes. Explain.
It's not very convincing, but I kind of wanted a deep pull for this last one. If there's any chance that he's going to get this thing going back in the right direction again, it's got to be this year. Because he's going to get the chances, right? Because the Bears, I think it was a bit rash of them. They traded what ended up being the 32nd overall pick for Chase Claypool, which is, it's kind of a tough pill to swallow. It ended up being a 2nd round pick this year, but in a normal draft, like the 32nd pick is still a 1st round talent. So that's kind of a big chunk of value to lose, I think, for Claypool. But, it's interesting because when he was a rookie and early on in his career, he kind of looked like this guy who was going to be like a dominant deep threat at the very least. When Ben Roethlisberger still had some semblance of an arm before he retired. And then it just hasn't really clicked since then. I don't think he's really developed his skills, but I think it's an interesting situation for him, because he doesn't have to be the best receiver on this team because DJ Moore is here.
Right.
They've invested enough in him. And honestly, the wide receiver depth chart it's not super strong where he wouldn't see the field. He's going to get his chances. And if Justin Fields can kind of take the next step in year 2 with Luke Getsy and running this offense, it's not a bad spot for him to bounce back, but I think it's mostly going to have to be on him. He's got all the physical talent in the world, hasn't really developed the skills yet needed to be a full-fledged starting wide receiver, but he's going to have plenty of targets thrown his way to try and figure that out this year. So maybe he can do it.
No, I think you make a good point. And I know I took that sarcastic tone to start, but I think it's more to say Chase Claypool has not shown that yet in Chicago, but that doesn't mean he can't. And that's what I was thinking a lot, even when we did the tiers, is every year there's so much change up in the NFL that I felt like when I was making these tiers, I'm like, how much am I just relying on what we saw last year versus what's coming this year? So we could see Chase Claypool really have a year where he, DJ Moore, become the catching targets that Justin Fields needs. Awesome. Well, go check out that article from CMAC about the bounce back candidates. We're going to take a quick ad break and then we will be back with our tiers. All right, coming back in, we are now going to present our NFL tiers for 2023, the time where we say everything that is going to be proven wrong in 2 months, proven wrong again in 3 months, and proven wrong again in 4 months. But we are willing to do that for you guys. So what we did in this exercise is CMAC and I each have 5 tiers that we put the 32 teams into, which are loosely labeled Super Bowl or Bust, Super Bowl Sleepers, Playoff Hopefuls, Middle Class, and Full Rebuild Mode. And we tried to predict now, going into the season, where do these teams fall? So we'll take y'all tier by tier. We'll each tell you who we have in that tier, and then we'll explain why we differ on some of this. So CMAC, why don't you start off with who you have in your Super Bowl or Bust category?
So for Super Bowl or Bust, I've got Ravens, Bengals, 49ers, Eagles, Chiefs, Bills.
Okay, I am a little less generous with how many teams are Super Bowl or Bust, but I had the Chiefs, Eagles, and Bengals like you did, and then I had the New York Jets. So you believe in the Ravens, Niners, and Bills a little bit more than I do in terms of how close they are. I've got the Jets. Take us through why those 3 teams belong in the top tier.
I'll start with the Ravens. I was just really impressed with the way that they ended the season on defense. Yeah, especially because once Tyler Huntley came to the starting lineup, and there's a game like where they had to play Anthony Brown against the Bengals late in the season. I thought the defense, like, they still held up their end of the bargain, especially in that playoff game. You know, you're one goal line shove away from potentially beating the Bengals and moving on to the divisional round, and maybe Lamar Jackson would have had time to come back at that point. Like, they certainly more than held up their end of the bargain.
Yeah.
And I just think, you know, if you're going to get Lamar back and Todd Monken, who I really think the world of as a play caller, you got the best receiving core that he's had since he's been in Baltimore. It's not just Mark Andrews and guys, it's Mark Andrews and like guys who can actually contribute in a more consistent way. I just think, like, from top to bottom, this roster should have, you know, Super Bowl or bust mentality, because I think the defense kind of played well enough once they got used to Mike McDonald's scheme by the end of the year. So that's my spiel for the Ravens. I kind of feel similarly about the 49ers in the sense that their defense is so good and Kyle Shanahan's so good that, I don't know, they've been in the NFC Championship games with not ideal quarterback situations a handful of times under Kyle Shanahan. So I'm gonna give them, you know, just the benefit of the doubt that they can do it again. And the Bills is tough because I think this is the one where the arguments can fall apart pretty quickly, but you still got Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. That's going to be enough to get you like a top 5 pass offense at the end of the day. And I think, you know, the secondary is interesting because I don't think their safety situation is quite what it used to be, because you have Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer getting older and dealing with injuries. But I still like what they got going on at cornerback, and their linebacker situation is still solid. So I think the defense is, this might be like the worst version of the Bills defense that we've seen over the past couple of years, but they're still good enough on offense to kind of, you know, carry that over.
Right. Yeah, no, I think you make good cases. I think that as I hear you say the 49ers case, I'm like, all right, if we were to redo this, I'm already ready to move the Niners up, because everything but the quarterback, I feel very, very good about. And I think what I need to remind myself is that while quarterback is so important on almost every NFL team, you don't need excellent and elite quarterback play in Kyle Shanahan's system. So I got you there. The Ravens, I still just can't tell, like, how much are they relying on Odell Beckham Jr. and a rookie receiver? That makes me nervous. I think that it might be an adjustment for Lamar and anyone going to a new offense under Todd Monken, but I am excited about that. The high end, the Bills, I don't know. I think the window might have passed. And I don't mean the window to be very good, but like the Super Bowl window. And it's funny you mentioned that about the safeties, because there's a part of me that was like, maybe I'm underrating their safety group. And in a division where you've got great quarterback play, you actually have the safeties to counter that and like make them pay for it. But I don't know. I had the New York Jets in that ranking. And I think that this is a team that looked like it was there other than the quarterback last year. And now they've got the quarterback. They had a top 5 defense last year. They've got just like a nasty defensive line. They've got a lot of talent. I mean, coming off defensive rookie of the year, offensive rookie of the year. And I think that Aaron Rodgers is in the right headspace to engage his teammates. I was talking to Rich Gannon actually today for a story that will be coming about NFL quarterbacks turning into position coaches, and Rich had that when Jim Harbaugh was his position coach. And we ended up talking about this idea of like, it's not about does the quarterback understand the offense and what's on the field, it's can he get everyone else on the same page. And we've seen what happens when Aaron Rodgers is not on the same page as his receivers at the beginning of last year. And I think that he seems to be in the headspace this year where he is determined to get on the same page with the guys and not just be like in his own stratosphere in terms of how he's playing the game. I think that yes, he's changing teams, but he's going to Nathaniel Hackett's offense. And so I just feel like they have the guys. It's not that I think they will for sure get to the Super Bowl, but certainly they need to have the mindset of Super Bowl or bust when you think about what they just gave up. And secondly, I do think they have the talent. I think then comes injury, football being a game of variability, all of that. But I am ready to put them there. What kept you from putting the Jets there?
The offensive line situation kind of scares me. You're one injury away from like having something pretty dark up there, I think. And then when you look at the rest of the division, I think that that's kind of where they might have some troubles this year. The Patriots, they still have, it might not be, a defensive line that's going to go out there and get 60 sacks, but like they're still tough and they're led by Matt Judon and Christian Barmore, who are good players. The Bills, they're getting Von Miller back this year. Ed Oliver is locked in for 4 more years. The Dolphins, they got Vic Fangio, and hopefully Bradley Chubb is going to get more acclimated to that defense and what they got going on over there. So I see like why people are excited. And personally, I think like for the Jets themselves, they should absolutely be looking at this year as Super Bowl or bust, because that cap space gets a little dark, gets a little tricky once you move on into next year. So they need to be looking at it like that, but I'm just not sure they have the offensive line talent to kind of get them across the finish line. And, I until we see Breece Hall run again, I think that's a little bit shaky. And honestly, once you get past Breece Hall and their running back depth chart, they don't have a whole lot. So to me, they're like a top heavy roster. Yeah. But I'm not sure they have like all the depth that you usually see from a Super Bowl winner.
Yeah, no, it's good points. And it is interesting where I was trying to figure out, are we saying here's what they think they are, or here's what we think they are? And it's often not the same. Moving to the second tier, Super Bowl sleepers. I have the Buffalo Bills, the Dallas Cowboys, the San Francisco 49ers, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Miami Dolphins. How about you?
For this tier, I had the Miami Dolphins, Seattle Seahawks, Dallas Cowboys, Los Angeles Chargers, New York Jets, and Jacksonville Jaguars.
All right. So I've got the Bills and Niners coming in when you had them a little bit higher. You've got the Chargers and Jaguars, who I am not yet bringing to the equation. So I'll just start off by saying, I think we've already touched on what I need to see from the Bills, what I need to see from the Niners. You've convinced me the Niners belong higher. I still believe the Bills belong here. Why do you think the Chargers and Jaguars are going to be just as competitive as the Dolphins, Seahawks, and Cowboys, who I think just have a lot of talent and showed last year that they can do something with that talent?
Maybe I'm too high, but too high on them. Too high. Too high on them. But, Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence, they're just two of my favorite quarterbacks in the league. And I look at those guys as guys who have the talent to, like, if you get into the playoffs and they have like a really strong 3-game stretch, who knows like what can happen for you. That's really the reason why I put them in those tiers. I think especially the Jaguars on a whole, I don't think they have the best team construction here. I still am really worried about their pass rush. I'm not quite sold on their secondary either. But still, when you have Trevor Lawrence, and I think the way that he played towards the end of the season, he was just catching fire. And I know he had a rough first half in that Chargers game, but in the second half, I think you saw why you Jaguars fans should be excited to have him for the next 10 plus years. And even when they played the Chiefs, I think you saw the talent difference between those two teams, but he did enough to kind of keep him in the game. So I think for me, literally just having Trevor Lawrence there, put them in that tier for me. It's like, what's a team that can hit the wild card and like actually get hot and go on a run? I think they have the quarterback talent to do it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. That with the Chargers, really a big question for me is like, how much of a difference can Kellen Moore make for this offense? Like,
Right.
he's got an extremely talented quarterback, some who probably would say is more talented than the quarterback he came from, or he has proven more with his arm talent than the quarterback he came from. But how quickly can he get that offense up to speed? Is Brandon Staley going to get the defense where it needs to be with the pieces? Like, I kind of just can't tell what they're going to do with this new system, but there's definitely a lot of upside there.
Well,
Tier
there's some
three.
teams. Listen, there's some teams who are just eternally cursed, because you look at,
And yet you think they're Super Bowl sleepers. You're the one grading
sleepers
easier here,
sleepers
sir. I will say it's funny you say that, because that's kind of how I see the Cowboys, where I was like sleeping, but like, don't hold your breath for them to wake up.
Correct.
Prove us wrong. I would love to be proven wrong. That'd be so much fun my family's Cowboys fans, even though I don't really root for a team. They'd be very happy if the Cowboys made it all the way. But like, at some point you see 30 years of trends and you start to wonder how they're going to be reversed. But yeah, so you think Chargers perpetually top out at sleepers?
Yeah, it's like I call it like the triangle of doom, where you have the Falcons, the Vikings, and the Chargers. Like, they all kind of exist.
What about the Lions?
Oh, they're just irrelevant though. Like, they've been irrelevant.
We're gonna be a pentagon before this is over, but continue.
Hopefully, but I mean, and I just means like in terms of these teams that they always look like they're going to get close, and on paper they have the talent where they should get a lot closer than they do, and then they just don't. You have a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl. You have a 27-0 lead at halftime of a wild card game. You're the Vikings. I don't know. It kind of gets dark for you.
There you go. Speaking of the Vikings, let's move to the tier we both have them in, which is playoff hopeful, tier 3 of 5. So I've got the Minnesota Vikings, the Baltimore Ravens, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Denver Broncos, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Detroit Lions, the New Orleans Saints, the Carolina Panthers, the New York Giants, and the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Okay, I have the Saints, Vikings, Broncos, Browns, Giants, Lions, Falcons, and Steelers in this tier.
Yeah, definitely a lot of overlap there. Definitely a lot of teams where it's kind of like they could do it, but will they? And that's what's fun about this game, is that you really don't know. I've got the Jaguars and Chargers here, just one tier below you. And I agree with you. I'm more high on the Jaguars than the Chargers, I would say, based off what we saw toward the end of last year. But I think both of them have a lot of potential. It's just Chargers maybe have a few more question marks to me. I've got the Panthers here. You don't. I think a big part of this for me is the division they're playing in. I think that if it's a playoff hopeful tier and they're in a division where there's an easier route to the playoffs, that is helpful. But I do also look at the way they played at the end of last year, the culture of like, we're going to keep trying even when it's kind of lost, the way that I don't think that they like gave up on themselves despite losing Christian McCaffrey, which losing a talent like that can be pretty devastating for a franchise. And then you have Bryce Young in there. I don't think he's going to be the best player in the NFL right away, but I am always interested with these first year quarterbacks. And I actually had this in my notes for the Colts, but I'll say it here of like, what can guys do before there's NFL tape on them? And I still think it applies a little bit more to Anthony Richardson just because of how unusual of a prospect he is. But I am really interested of like, we don't know what's coming. So they might do things, catch people off guard this year. And yeah, next year when they've got film, it's going to come back to bite them. But I'm very intrigued by what the Panthers can do there. So why don't you have the Panthers here? And why do you have the Browns here? Which I will say my first crack at this, the Browns were in this tier. I moved them down. And I think you'll probably end up being right.
The Panthers, really the only thing that stopped me from putting them in this tier was I'm a little worried for this year what they've put around Bryce Young. Because when
Adam Thielen is not sufficient for an NFL
yeah,
offense.
it's not. It ain't the Adam Thielen of like 4 or 5 years ago, And it's Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, and Jonathan Mingo, who's a rookie, and I guess Terrace Marshall. Like, you're just kind of to piece together something for 1 year. I don't think it's like a bad plan as far as just getting Bryce Young's feet wet. I think as for that goal, it's a good enough group, but. I think if you're looking at being a little bit more feisty and trying to actually get into like that wild card run, I think that group could leave a little bit more to be desired. But what made it tough for me, like putting them a little bit lower, was I still think the defense is really good. When you look at the collection of talent that they've hired or acquired and put together, it's not a bad group. I just am a little bit worried about the offensive skill talent in terms of making plays past what only Bryce Young can afford you, and kind of being playmakers on their own. Miles Sanders helps. The offensive line should be pretty solid, but I'm a little worried about like the tight end and wide receiver group. And for the Browns, I struggle to say kind things about Deshaun Watson, but
He's a really good football player.
right, I would just be surprised if last year if he looked as bad as he did last year. I don't know if he's ever going to reach the peaks that he had before everything went south with him, because like that last full year he played with the Texans, even though they went 4-12, like his quarterback efficiency was like right up there with Patrick Mahomes and normal MVP candidates. I mean, he's really, really good when he's on. And I think just in terms of the talent, it was worth trading 3 first-round picks for him, because he can be, to me, like that elite guy if things work out for him. And I just kind of don't think it's going to look as slogged down as it did last year. So you got Amari Cooper, who still looks to be a pretty quality receiver. You got Elijah Moore in the trade, Cedric Tillman in the draft, Nick Chubb still in the backfield. You still got a pretty good interior offensive line. So I think they'll be able to put up some points. I do worry about the defense. I think when you're in a spot where you're paying like Dalvin Tomlinson 4-year contract for a boatload of money, that's probably indicative of the guys that you have around him. But still, Myles Garrett, JLK at linebacker, they still got enough, splash players that can make the plays on their own, and the offense should be better than it was last year.
Yeah, we shall see. All right, moving down to our 4th tier, which we've named the middle class, which is a very respectable thing to be a part of. Let's get that straight. I've got the Cleveland Browns, the Indianapolis Colts, Washington Commanders, Atlanta Falcons, Green Bay Packers, and New England Patriots. We have a lot of overlap here again, but go for your list.
This tier for me, I have the Rams, Bears, Raiders, Packers, Patriots, Panthers, Titans, and Colts.
So the Commanders are the rare team that I was more generous to than you were. Because we have seen CMAC is the professor who grades easier. Jori, you might want to curve in her class.
Yeah.
I don't think the Commanders are going to be great, and I think that they're pretty substantially going to be last in the division. But I kind of just feel like they're tough and competitive even when they're not great. And so I think that whether that doesn't necessarily mean a ton of wins, but at least means like you can't run right over them when you go in and play them. Now, what Sam Howell and or Jacoby Brissett does at quarterback definitely is going to impact that. But I just kind of feel like you've got Eric Bieniemy running that offense now. The defense has been tough, even when it's kind of had varying degrees of success. I think that their defensive line is still something to be worried about, even if last year they were less scary. I think that they will give you trouble, even if they won't beat you, and they won't beat you at the end of the season. Why don't you have them there, and why do you have the Rams and Raiders here?
For me, it's just with the Commanders, it's mainly like quarterback. Like if they choose to put Jacoby Brissett in as a starter, I would honestly put them into this tier. But I don't, because I think when you look at what Jacoby did last year while Watson was suspended, it was really impressive, honestly.
Yeah.
Like it was easily the best football that he's played of his career, and he looked like someone that should actually be starting for an NFL team. But, we keep hearing them talk about, they want to give Sam Howell a chance, and they've kind of flip-flopped back and forth on whether it's going to be a quarterback competition or if they're just going to give Sam Howell the keys. And to me, if they just give Sam the keys, that's what's got them lower to me. I don't know if Sam's bad yet, but I don't know. He was a 5th-round pick for a reason, probably. I just
Tom
think
Brady, 6th-round pick for a reason.
Yeah. We got so many examples.
Dak Prescott, 4th-round pick for a reason.
So maybe Sam Howell's the next guy. I think he's, I think his arm strength is a little intriguing. I don't know how much else is intriguing beyond that. It's interesting from the standpoint of like you actually have a 5th-round rookie who it might make, or 5th-round, 2nd-year player at this point, where it might make sense to give him some reign, but I don't know if they're a better option than what Jacoby Brissett just showed last year. And I
If
think,
you had to bet on Sam Howell or Lloyd Howell, who would you choose to succeed more
well,
this
I know
year?
more about Sam, so I'll just go Sam off the strength of,
Wow, wow.
he,
You think the NFLPA is really in a full rebuild?
I don't know I didn't know who Lloyd Howell was before like 3 days ago. So
neither did the players who voted for him.
we're on the same boat here. I know more about Sam Howell, so I'm just going to trust my vast wealth of information on the Howells here.
Yes. All right. You got the Rams and Raiders here. Why?
The Rams, I mean, maybe this might be just overblown respect, but it's just hard for me to imagine a team like if these guys are healthy, like Aaron Donald, Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp. I feel like that's enough to keep you out of like let's call it like the top 8 of the draft, where once you start getting to like the teams.
That's exactly where they want to be. This is terrible news for them, Steve.
I know. That's where they need to be. Like honestly, if they were, if I was in charge of the Rams, I would have said, "Hey guys, we won a Super Bowl, but it's over now. Aaron, where do you want to go play? Cooper, where do you want to go play? Matthew, where do you want to go play?" And then we'll kind of eat the cap charges after that. But once you trade Jalen Ramsey, I think the writing's kind of on the wall here.
The writing was also like literally on the internet when Kevin Demoff was like, "We're changing strategies here and selling our players, but we could still win."
Yeah, maybe they could win like 6 or 7 games. And, maybe even 7 feels like a stretch because, dude, like when you look at the defensive depth chart, I love football and I obsess over this stuff. And I struggle to like know who some of the guys who are projected to start for them on defense are. So look, it's going to be a long year for them, most likely, but I just, the old man inside me, we just Stafford, Kupp, Donald, that's worth a few wins a year. So that's why I'm gonna give it to him.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think for me, it was, they still have potential. And like you say, like if you get the offensive line going, you've got Stafford to Kupp, how much more do you need? You've got Aaron Donald. My thing is, given that our last tier was called full rebuild, I was like, they're probably top 2 poster children for full rebuild in this league when you look at how they've sold away players. And so that doesn't mean that they're going to be terrible. But I think even if the offensive line is healthier, which is extremely likely given how much trouble they had with it last year, is Stafford going to be healthy? I mean, we talked about that elbow. I think that there are other things that could go wrong, and they intentionally are not leaving themselves depth for this year. So that will be interesting. The other thing I want to know, and I don't say this to like make light of it, I'm thrilled for Sean McVay and his wife Veronica that they are expecting. I think she posted last week that she was 5 months pregnant. Like, if you're Sean McVay and they need to take, like, can he just take paternity leave in the middle of the season?
It seemed like he was close to doing that in January, so I don't think it's off the table.
I was gonna say this seems to be setting up quite well. Like, enjoy your time with your kid. Come back next year, Coach Caleb Williams. Win-win for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Get someone some head coaching experience. Okay, the Raiders were the other team for me that it's like I struggle to not put you in rebuild if you just like don't have an answer at quarterback. And again, it's not that Jimmy G can't do stuff. He is capable when he's healthy, but is he healthy? And I feel like Devontae Adams even thinks they're in real rebuild. And it's kind of this weird thing where like you've got a defense that needs a lot of help, but then you've got Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, which going back to your Rams argument, like how do you put them in the bottom tier when you have that kind of talent? But can they do anything?
Yeah, like the Raiders is the one that more I sat here probably should have put them in the bottom tier. And it's tough because they have, like you said, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs. They drafted Michael Mayer at the top of the second round, who I thought was the best tight end in the draft this year. But then you have the Jimmy G situation, which feels like more flimsy than a normal Jimmy G situation, which is always like, kind of.
He's not entering the season healthy.
No, which is a red flag for just his history, if we're going to be honest about it. It's really like you look at some of these teams that are held together. We talked about the Jets earlier, like where, it feels a little top heavy and you fall throughout the rest of the roster. Maybe you can get concerned there. But the Raiders might be like one of the most extreme answers for that, for that type of team where you have arguably the best wide receiver in football. Last year, arguably the best running back in football, and you don't really accomplish all that much. I kind of think there's a chance where Jimmy G is maybe a little bit more functional than Derek Carr was last year, because I don't think Derek
He
Carr
knows the
pushed.
offense well.
He knows the offense. I don't think Derek was as aggressive as he should have been last year at times. And maybe that will help buoy them. But I think the bigger problem comes on defense, man. Like, I don't really know
Yeah.
how, unless Tyree Wilson is like this world eater right off the bat, which is, it's not impossible just given like his level of talent. I kind of think you're struggling at a spot where Max is gonna have to carry a huge load of defense again, which is just not really tenable for
Yeah.
a defensive tackle or or defensive end at really any defense. Max Crosby, he played like over 90% of the snaps in every single game that the Raiders played last year, which is just, it's insane. And they don't really have like great secondary play on the back end
Right.
of it. So, the more I think about it, the more I talk myself out of it. And they probably should be in the full rebuild spot. Especially like, dude, if Jimmy G can't go this year or he gets hurt early on, they're done. So like Caleb
Right.
Mays,
Devontae Adams can't throw to himself.
yeah, like Drake May or Caleb Williams, they should be looking at property in Vegas if Jimmy G gets hurt. That's kind of where the Raiders are.
Right. And even when you think about like what would bring someone into a playoff hopeful tier, the Raiders might have a little more hope if they were in the NFC South or the AFC South. But they're playing against Patrick Mahomes twice a year. They're playing against Justin Herbert twice a year. And they're playing against Russell Wilson twice a year, which I think this year is going to be something to be concerned about. Is it going to be like peak Russell Wilson? I don't know. But I think Sean Payton's going to get him to a very different place than he was at last year. So best of luck to the Raiders, but we'll see what they can do this year or if they will be in contention to get the quarterback for next year that they maybe wanted to draft this year and weren't able to. Our final tier, you start us off and then I'll round us off.
Final tier. I only have 4 teams because I am the professor that gives everybody like a B- at worst. This is the final tier. I have the Buccaneers, Texans, Commanders, Cardinals. And I think you can go through your teams, because I think the question that we have here posed is kind of interesting based on like the last 2 tiers.
Yeah. So I've got the Titans, Texans, Raiders, Cardinals, Bucks, Rams, and Bears. We both have the Texans, Cardinals, and Bucks. I think you can see pretty clearly that the Cardinals are not even trying to make this year their year. And that doesn't mean they're not trying. I actually really like what the Cardinals are doing. They're just not doing it for this year, and that's okay. It means they're realistic about where they're at. And the Texans also, like, I think they're still really exciting this year when you have CJ Stroud and Will Anderson Jr. coming in and D'Amico Ryans at head coach, among others. But this is not the year they should be ready. Buccaneers basically depended on Tom Brady last year. And with all due respect to Baker Mayfield, he's not Tom Brady. And so then you get into the point where the Raiders we discussed, the Rams we discussed, those are teams that to me are in rebuild mode. The Bears, I actually am excited about them, but I think they're rebuilding. I think that their ideas of what they need to do, of getting that offensive lineman, of putting the pieces around Justin, I just think that like they're at least a year away. Maybe that makes them more middle class. Maybe it doesn't. And maybe when you have a quarterback as good as Justin Fields, who showed the improvement from year 1 to year 2, he should not be in rebuild. But I think it's not like, I think they are a year or 2 into full rebuild mode. And so that's why I had them there. Why do you think the Titans are higher? I kind of went back and forth on this. And actually, I think that what broke the tie for me was the suspension that came down today. And I know it's just 6 games for their right tackle, but like, I don't think they had the luxury of like losing someone on their offensive line. So why do you think the Titans should be in the middle class?
Just a defense. Really,
yeah.
more to
Mike
me, like
Vrabel honestly is like, you kind of always have to believe in him, almost like a Mike Tomlin close.
Right. I don't think that the way that I would describe the Titans or how I project them, like not good, but one of those teams that you would just hate to play. Because you're gonna leave that game just bruised up and banged up. You might have won, but they're gonna play really tough defense this year. Again, their defensive line is probably one of the best run stopping units in the league. I think just as a whole, the Titans defense got a little underrated last year, but the offense, I don't see much coming from them. Like Derrick Henry, good luck, bro, because the offensive line, they, like you said, they couldn't really afford to lose anyone, and they just lost someone for 6 games, one of their starters. And I think another concerning part for the Titans offense is their wide receiver situation. You kind of need Treylon Burks to take a huge step this year. But outside of that, I think the defense is really good. So that's why, they just missed like the full rebuild tier for me. I think, it's tough for me to see, like you said, Mike Vrabel team just totally bottoming out because that really just hasn't been their MO ever.
Right. No, I think that's a good point, is that they might be like average from a record standpoint. I think one of the reasons I also had them there was, even though I think that, I mean, I'd love to be proven wrong. Like, are they even within a few years of having the offense they need? Like, what is the plan for the offense going forward?
Run Derrick Henry into the ground until he has no more legs, and hopefully Ryan Tannehill can hit just enough play action shots where you look like a real offense.
And then what about a year from now? Because I don't know that they're both going to be on the team in a year.
Will Levis and Malik Willis fight to the duel or fight to the death, and we'll see what happens.
Do you have confidence in that?
No, and I think honestly one of the problems is I don't think they're going to be bad enough to get their hands on Drake May or Caleb Williams. So that's why they're to me, like they're a frisky team, not a good one, but a frisky team.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's why I think it happens a little bit with our tiers, is we were like going off slightly different definitions of what made it. But I would love to see one of these teams from our bottom tier make it to the playoffs. I would love to, I don't want to say I want to see someone fail, but it's going to be fun to be proven wrong and look back at this and be like, where were we right and where were we wrong? Before we get out of here, is there anything else you want to say about why you had the Commanders in that tier? I know you talked about Sam Howell.
No, that's about it. It's really just the quarterback. And I kind of am a little worried about their defense in the standpoint of like just how they run schematically. I don't think they always live up to their talent level is what I would say. But yeah, that's all I really got on the tiers. Falcons NFC title or NFC South title, not NFC title.
NFC title. Clip it, Stone. Clip it. Falcons NFC title. C-Max said this. This is not AI generated. You said it.
Wow. Yeah, we're getting 1,000 yards from Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson this year. So
there you go, triple threat. We love it. All right, that is our show for today. We hope y'all enjoyed some good old off-season content. The show will be back next Thursday. C-Mac and I sure will not be. We will be out. We're going to be back for you training camp. You want us to recharge? Just trust us. I am at Jori Epstein on Twitter. C-Mac is at 4verts, and our ace producer behind the glass is Stone at SJ Rochelle on Twitter. Help us keep Therese Paylor's legacy alive at breakingt.com/Therese for the All Juice tier hoodie. Support the Therese Paylor scholarships at Howard U and Mizzou directly. And don't forget to check out our new NBA podcast, Ball Don't Lie, featuring Vince Goodwill, Jake Fisher, Dan Devine, and Kristen Beek, and our new MLB podcast, Bandwagon, featuring Hannah Kaiser and Zach Kreiser, both available wherever you get your podcasts. I know we say that every week, but especially this week when like NFL news is going to be slow, NBA free agency and summer league will be staffing. I don't really know baseball schedule, but I think they've got an all-star game coming if the schedule hasn't drastically changed. And I think there's like a Yankees exciting moment this week. That's the extent of my baseball knowledge. So yeah, go check out our colleagues and get your sports fix from them. Leave us a 5-star review, tell your friend, comment, share it, tell everyone to listen to Pod to win the game. And our colleagues, surprise guests, will see you next Thursday.